Cool. So could both of you state your names and how you're related to Donn Eisele?
Okay. I'm Kristy Eisele, and he is my stepfather. My mom married him when I was 5, right after he went up. Came back down and they got married.
And I'm Andrew Eisele, and I'm Donn Eisele's son.
Great. So how was life growing up with an astronaut as a father?
Life with an astronaut father was, I don't know, I think that's just what he did. You know, it was just a dad like anybody else has a dad. You know, he would just go off to work and then he'd come home.
By the time I was born, he was done with that. So
That's true.
That was just a, and I
think he retired the year you were born.
Yeah.
72.
So that was when we went to Thailand.
Right.
So growing up, I knew that he was an astronaut, but that didn't really mean much. It didn't register until I was probably older, when I would be in school with my friends and I would mention something about my father being an astronaut, and everyone would be like, "Oh, wow, that's really amazing." And I'm like, "Really? I don't really know much about it. Let me go home and ask." So, yeah, he was a dad to me, first and foremost. Like he was a father figure.
He did come and talk at our schools, though.
Oh yeah.
Every year he would come and give a talk to the whole assembly or.
He'd always bring the 16 millimeter movie.
Right.
So pretty much every school had a little projector, so we'd have to get that wheeled in and hooked up. But it was a sort of a little mini documentary about the space flight, and then he would answer questions afterwards. Inevitably, everyone asks, "How do you go to space? How do you go to the bathroom?"
That was the big.
Yeah.
That's the big question every single time.
Nice. Interesting. How old were the kids at the schools?
Oh, I mean, this started for me, it started in elementary school.
Yeah, me too.
I think he came into our second grade class when we lived in Williamsburg, and then when we moved to Florida, he was definitely coming in.
It was high school.
Yeah.
Oh, middle school for you. High school for me too.
Yeah. I think he definitely came into my middle school.
Right.
I don't think by high school, well, he passed away when I was a sophomore, so yeah, that didn't happen.
How was growing up in Thailand, by the way? Because that seems like a really interesting thing to go.
That was really cool. Well, you were only.
I was an infant.
Yeah.
I was teeny tiny. I was learning to walk and talk.
You were 4 months old, I think, when we went there, and 2 when we came back.
Yeah.
And I'm 8 years older than him, so I remember it more.
Yes, you would.
That was pretty cool, though. But I mean, just like anything else, it's just where you lived. The weirdest thing to me at that age, I think I was 8 when we went over there, there was no television. So for a couple years, we had no TV, and I had to learn I knew how to read, but that just became my entertainment, so I became a reader.
Mm-hmm. Did he ever talk to you about his time in space?
He didn't really talk to me about it. You?
Well, I would ask questions when I was little about it. Yeah. I mean...
What did he say?
Well, I think you learn more when other people are asking questions, because it just
true.
becomes the same, people want to have all kinds of questions, so they'll ask, usually in a public setting, and you're there listening, so that's where you're getting that. And then if you want to ask, I would ask him follow-up questions, when we were at home or whatever, but I don't know, it wasn't like he would wax poetic about it. That was his job. He just sort of did it. And if you had... He was very... He wasn't a big talker. He's very inward. So he was often quiet or reserved, or was very calculated. So if you asked him questions, it was very analytical. It was very scientific in terms of the explanation about stuff like that. He was an engineer at heart. So
Yeah, very much an introvert.
yes, an introvert. That's a good word.
And until you could see like when they were going to go out into a social setting, you could see his little like wheels turning where he was going from his inward to his outward. So he would then put on his party face and talk, and he was a huge jokester.
Yes.
So he would
He loved jokes.
constant comedy.
He had a great sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
Loved Monty Python. I have really fun memories of watching the Flying Circus and then all the movies. He would just laugh and laugh. He had a great sense of humor.
Yeah.
It's interesting because how you say that it was just a job for him? That's okay. Yeah, it's all good. Because when I went with Nick to the Apollo 16 anniversary, all the astronauts there were like, "Oh, it was just a job."
Yeah.
While to us, it's something like incredible that
Right.
someone went to space and all of that.
Right.
So it was just interesting.
Well, a lot of the older astronauts, they were all test pilots. So that in and of itself, that mentality, like you're climbing into something that's like a vehicle, a piece of machinery that was designed by man that's going to push the limits of physics. There's a certain amount of like you have to check a lot of that fear before getting into a rocket or an airplane that's going to go twice the speed of sound or whatever.
Right.
It's that mentality. So yeah, it's very much, yep, it's business as usual. We're going to do a job. They're well trained, well rehearsed. Like, they put in the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how was he as a father? Like, how was it growing up with him?
Growing up with him was,
I don't know. It was more or less
Yeah.
a happy household. I mean, I don't really have any major complaints. There was no, we were just a normal family.
yeah,
At least that's how I thought of
me
it.
too.
Oh, so you knew him after, right? After he went up to space, right?
Yes.
So, do you know how his personality was before he went to space and then after, if it changed at all?
I don't think it changed. He grew up kind of a nerd, just very, like he was friends with all the girls but never really had any girlfriends. He was, I think it was that mentality where you kind of marry your high school sweetheart. I don't know if they were sweethearts or whatever, but you marry young and then you're doing this test flight. He's a fly boy, so he's what would you say? Just like a total dork. He was a dork. He was.
Yeah, I guess.
But they had he was a funny dork. He was hilarious. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I was too young. I wouldn't know what he was like before versus after.
Right.
'Cause
No, I
I wasn't
think
even born.
I think he was
I
the
only knew
same.
him from
I
after.
think when once you started becoming popular, like you're picked for the astronaut program, and it was just sort of this. It wasn't an overnight thing, but kind of a gradual. He got more popular, and all of a sudden, news people are coming around, and all of a sudden, the girls are coming around, and all of a sudden, he's like that. I think that was completely different. So when you're kind of a nerdy guy and then all of a sudden you're like super popular and everybody wants to talk to you and everybody wants your autograph and everybody, I think that was very much different for him. But personally, I think he was the same. I don't think that really changed him, who he was or anything like that.
He mentioned a lot of distrust for NASA. I was wondering if he ever talked to you about that, if you know anything about where that came from, because he talked a lot about that in the book.
Right.
There's a lot of politics.
Yeah, it was a lot of politics. I think NASA had picked these guys, and they really wanted them to be this all-American family man. You know, they all had wives and they had kids, and you know, when they moved, they had this entire area in Houston where they had built houses so that they could all live together, and there, you know, all the families were together, and they really wanted that that so-called all-American life for them to project out to everybody else. So I thought that was kind of weird. But you know, but you can't. You're not like that. Every person is different. Every astronaut, they all have their own personalities, and that's eventually going to come out at some time. So it's, I think that caused a lot of tension between NASA and each individual astronaut.
Yeah, well, he was the first.
He was the first one to get divorced.
He was the first one to get divorced, which
That totally threw a wrench in their all-American plans.
But he was the first, but he certainly wasn't the last.
Right.
Everybody started falling like dominoes after that.
Right.
But I think that was part of it, but I also think there was some personality. He talks about that in the book. There were some personality conflicts with himself and some of the higher ups or the people that were in charge of the missions. So that's why he retired when he did, because he could see that he wasn't going to get slated for anything anytime soon.
Right.
He didn't want to wait around for the shuttle, which would have taken another 10 years.
Yeah. I think he was back up for Apollo 10, and then after that he retired.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did he ever talk about like all of that? Because after he got divorced and then remarried, it sounded like your family was kind of shunned and pushed away for a bit, and then later he received all these rewards, and everyone was saying how it was finally, or it took long enough for this to happen.
Right.
Well, at the time, they didn't really know what to do with him, or didn't want to acknowledge that this had happened. They just kind of buried it. But when you think about what they did in terms of their pioneering mission, this was the first spacecraft of its kind, because Apollo 1, which is a completely different design, that exploded on the launch pad because of the oxygen environment. So after that, they all came together and redesigned the whole thing. So this was a first of its kind. It was just to see if they could get up into space and last long enough to get to the moon and back. And everything on their mission was well done, well received.
Well, I think there was a lot of distrust between NASA and the astronauts at that time too, because Apollo 1 they tried to rush through, and there was this oxygen problem, and I think they kind of knew that it wasn't like 100%, but they wanted to get it up there anyway. And so I think it was totally a preventable accident, and that really made the astronauts mad. So that's one of the reasons why they totally redesigned everything. And they originally the NASA didn't want the astronauts to be involved at all. They just wanted them to like be in the capsule. Was my understanding of how that worked.
Yeah, they were engineers, but the engineers weren't actually flying it. So
Right.
all of the astronauts at the time had engineering degrees. They were test pilots. They had some,
Right.
well, at least, I guess it's the second crop, because it was Wally, Walt Cunningham and Dad that had the strong engineering background.
Right.
And I think they put it to task. They were very much involved with the construction. At least that was my understanding. I could be wrong. But that's what I thought. I thought they had they were interacting like firsthand with engineers in terms of the redesign.
Oh yeah, during the redesign. But I mean before that, NASA just didn't want astronauts to be involved at all.
Well, that was the joke. Spam in a can.
Right. Spam in a can. What's that?
That's from the Right Stuff.
I don't remember that.
You don't remember that?
No.
Yeah, they all talked about astronauts and how like sending dogs or chimpanzees up. So now you're gonna throw a guy in there and it's just spam in a can. You're not doing anything. It's all controlled from the ground.
Right. That's what NASA wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there was a lot of animosity there between NASA and astronauts.
Do you have any memories, like anything that you remember about your time with him?
Every year he used to go to Houston to get a physical. He'd go to NASA. So when I was in, I don't know, probably 10 or 11, I remember going to Houston with him and touring around NASA. We got to go inside it was a shuttle simulator. So getting inside the cockpit, like a mock cockpit where they would fly simulations, that was really awesome. All the working
I never
controls.
Did that.
Yeah, that was really cool. Yeah, that was one thing. I don't know. What else?
I don't know. I never really did astronaut stuff with him.
He started Space Age Japan. So that was a company that he was involved with the U.S. Space Camp. So he took that and created his own company and started a space camp in Japan.
With a couple other astronauts, I think.
With a couple other astronauts. It was.
That's where he was when he died.
Yep.
Doing that.
He was solidifying that deal.
Yeah.
Was
I
Tom's
think
staff
I actually looked on Wikipedia yesterday, and it has that he died over there because at the opening ceremony, which I don't think that's true.
No, he passed. Not at the ceremony.
No, not.
He passed away in his hotel room.
No, I know, but I don't think he was there for any kind of ceremony. Or Mom would have been there.
Yeah. No, you're right. It was to sign the deal. It was to.
Right.
It was to solidify the deal, and the deal went through.
Right. So at that time, he was going to Japan. They were going all the time.
Did you ever go to the Japan to see the camp?
I never saw the camp, but I remember going to Japan. I went at least once.
I went once.
I thought you went twice.
No, I only went once.
No.
I went with just Dad.
I went with Mom and Dad. I was like 10 or 11. I think I was in 5th grade. And it wasn't it was all preliminary stuff. So he was doing mostly meetings and stuff, but we were there touring around, seeing all of the sites. Like, as an 11-year-old, I was completely blown away by Tokyo. It was so overwhelming. Talk about a large city. Ooh, that was crazy. It's but I also remember going up to Kyoto and staying in a traditional.
I did too.
Hotel.
When I went with Dad, and he was doing all kinds of meetings and stuff. So I think they had a Japanese partner, and the partner's daughter, who barely spoke any English, took me for like a few days, and we went on the bullet train, which is the coolest thing ever. I don't know why they don't have that here. Did that. We went up in the mountains. We went to Kyoto. We stayed in like traditional bed and breakfast places. It was cool.
Yes.
I think I was in college then, though.
Yes, you would have been.
Yeah, but he was doing meetings all the time, so I didn't really see him.
I think Tesla's trying to make the Hyperloop here, right?
Yes, I hope so. I think it's definitely starting in DC. Maybe DC here.
DC to New York?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
I'm still waiting for the flying cars.
No, you can't have flying cars.
Why?
Because there's like no roads up there. How are you going to police everybody? It's one thing if you have a flying car, but what about when everybody has a flying car?
Well, that's why you have like I don't know, like.
That's not going to happen.
Not anytime soon, I guess. Well, like satellite control. You could have computers that make sure you don't run into anybody. I don't know. certain heights, like one direction is higher than the other direction, so you miss each other.
That's what they're going to do tunnels for.
Air tunnels? How do you do an air tunnel?
No, in the ground, so you'll have different levels.
Okay.
Self-driving flying cars.
Yeah. Or what about the elevator to the moon?
That would be...
I thought it was an escalator.
No, it's an elevator. They're using the...
Not a stairway.
It's the carbon fiber nanotube. It's supposed to go from the Earth all the way up. And you can just... Or to a space station or whatever. I'd be down with that.
How would you do that without, like, what if a plane crashes into it or something?
Yeah, or how about an asteroid? Or I don't know. Whatever
I don't
flies
know. I don't know what the contingency.
Yeah.
But what about all the space junk? I'm worried about the space junk.
I'm worried about the crap in the ocean.
That too. Plastics. Gotta ban it. Anyways, we're off track.
Well, so wait, what do you think about what's going on today? Because before we go to the moon constantly, and we kind of slowed that down, and now it seems like we're kind of speeding up again. So what do you think about our space age today?
Well, I think we should definitely have a moon base. Absolutely.
I'm interested in going to Mars. That would be kind of cool.
That would be cool.
I don't know. I mean, we're still learning so much. We haven't quite figured out the
totally
physics
went
behind.
on pause for a while, but I think we're.
Well, I don't think this current administration is absolutely anti-science, anything. Like it's horrendous. Like it's all in the private sector. With companies like Tesla, they're the only ones that are actually flying into space, like the U.S. government. SpaceX, that's what it is. Yeah. I don't know. I'm disappointed in what's happening. Like the NASA is just.
Yeah,
it's such a low priority.
Put any money into it.
And they keep talking. They keep talking about going to Mars, but I don't foresee that happening anytime soon. I don't know.
But we should go.
I think NASA right now it's a shell of what it used to be. It's a little disappointing. I would like to see more. I'd like to see more support from
Congress.
Yeah.
They need to fund it.
Why do you think we should have a moon base, or we should go to Mars?
Well, I think we need to get off this planet. Not everybody, but I mean, we need to have alternatives. Because we're kind of killing ourselves right now. But you never know what could happen. So we need to be someplace else too.
Well, I think the space program certainly pushed progress in a positive way in terms of technology, and I think that would continue if we would put some more money into it and develop it. I think that. I don't know. I think it's great for national morale.
That's true.
And world morale. It's also bringing people together. We have an international space station. We just, as a country, the United States doesn't send stuff up to it anymore. It's all done through...
Yeah, we do.
But it's done through private companies.
Well...
NASA's not doing it.
Right.
The U.S. government doesn't do it.
Well, they hire the private companies to do it.
Yeah.
Which is okay. I don't.
Right, privatize everything.
No, I'm not about privatizing everything.
Well, we just privatized the space program.
If they can do it cheaper, then I'm okay with that.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not into privatizing prisons and healthcare.
Education.
Nope.
The boss.
Okay. Subject.
Sorry. You can't help it.
What do you think Donn would have said about today's space age?
I think he would be into totally going to Mars, or he would love that. He gave a talk once. I think it was like a commencement speech to some Florida university, and we used to have his speech written out like in a booklet. I don't know what happened to it, but I was reading through it, and he was talking about how from space you can see how we're really polluting the oceans. You can see all the crap that comes down from the rivers and into the oceans, and you can just see all this stuff from when you're up there. And we're just this tiny ball in this middle of space, and we're so small, and we're just we're going to end up killing ourselves from pollution. So he would totally be for going into, exploring other planets and things like that, I think.
I don't know. I don't know what he would think. I can't even speculate, because so much is different from when he was alive. I don't know how he would take it.
That's true. I'm sure they talked about going to Mars back then, though.
Maybe.
Okay, I don't know. That's what I think.
I think they've talked about going to Mars
For a long time.
Yeah, since maybe the late 1800s, I think. It's been mentioned. It was in I think it was the first fiction story about going to Mars, or about going to the moon actually, maybe, and not Mars. It was pretty spot on.
Yeah.
I think the story was about 3 people going to the moon together.
Really?
That's what happened. Yeah.
Huh. That's funny.
Is that like Jules Verne?
I think it's in the book. It's in his book.
Oh, is it? I don't remember that.
I think towards the end, the part about history, the history.
Okay.
of
Oh, yeah.
space. Yeah.
Okay.
It was pretty interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, I think he'd be into it.
Mm-hmm. What do you think Donn's legacy is?
Legacy.
Define legacy.
What did he leave behind from just his life?
Huh. I don't know. That's a hard one.
It's a hard one. I mean, it's from his career standpoint. He was a space pioneer and explorer.
Right. I mean, our space program wouldn't be where it is today if they didn't have Apollo 7, even though kind of the forgotten Apollo. And they kind of skip over that.
Yep.
Because it just went around the Earth and not around the moon like Apollo 8. And everyone kind of starts with that. In the Apollo program.
It's true.
Because it was more of a test Apollo after the first one blew up.
It's certainly not the most glamorous one.
Right. Well, that's what it is. It's not glamorous. But,
I
yeah.
mean, that, I
he
think
was
is
definitely an integral part of that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the most important part of his legacy is what he achieved or what he did. I mean, there's the personal legacy, which is his family.
Right.
His kids. But I think he would most want to be remembered for, his contribution to the space program.
Yeah.
And being the first ones to go right after what happened to Apollo 1 is kind of
right.
scary. And who would
he was
wanna
supposed
do
to be
that?
on Apollo 1.
Yeah.
Yep, he hurt his shoulder.
Yeah.
Lucky.
I think he felt really bad about that. I think he carried some guilt around about that.
Anybody would.
Yeah.
But you don't know.
Right.
can't really blame yourself. But yeah, I think on some subconscious level it might have been that.
Oh. It stopped.
It did?
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, if you want to take a break or something.
Okay.
I don't really have any. I don't really have any more questions.
Okay.
But if you want to talk about anything you want, that'd be cool.
Okay.
Just whatever you want to mention when we start again. Let's see if it's. Yeah, I'm gonna change. I think he was right, but also it's also full at the
Okay.
same time. Because it says 8 minutes left,
Oh, yeah.
but I think it's full and it can only do 30 minutes
Okay.
at a time. Cool.
All right. I'll be right back.
Yeah, thank you.